for a freshman, he rarely makes mistakes. This kid is remarkably polished and makes great decisions all the time with the basketball.
Really quick, before I begin, if you guys can smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm, this seriously makes a huge difference to my videos and lets YouTube know to recommend this video to a brand new audience. So thank you so much for doing that, and let's begin.
I think this is a really deep draft, and I think there are legitimate arguments to be made if Detroit decided to go a different direction, and especially with Evan Mobley. I have him going 2 to the Rockets. A lot of people have Jalen Green going to the Rockets at 2. I think those are probably, if Cade Cunningham's off the board, that the 2 directions the Rockets could go. You said something about Evan Mobley that I want to follow up on because I've seen the same thing. For a freshman, he rarely makes mistakes. Like you said, you go through 40 clips of Evan Mobley, and where are the mistakes? Not only that, here's an interesting stat. Of all the bigs that have been drafted over like the last 20 years, his foul rate per 40 minutes is the lowest of any of them, and by a ridiculous amount. He averages like 2 fouls per 40 minutes. That's incredible for a young big man. That he doesn't get in foul trouble. It speaks to the mobility of Mobley and how quick he's able to move and get himself in position, be able to guard other people. Anthony Davis was the guy that came closest to that of big guys, another sort of incredibly fluid, athletic big man. Are we underselling Evan Mobley because the league has evolved and that, the position that Cade Cunningham plays is such a coveted position? And, what Mobley is playing as a big is less coveted now than it was, 10, 15 years ago. And also the lack of sexiness. Like Evan Mobley doesn't have the ball at the end of the game and, is trying to score the same way Cade Cunningham does. And are we overlooking stuff like, for a 19-year-old, this kid is remarkably polished and makes great decisions all the time with the basketball?
Well, the biggest thing is you're right on point, is, 2010. We're not even talking about Cade Cunningham going 1. We just are. I don't know. Maybe it's the Warriors going small and then everybody going small. But I think there's one thing that we've learned, especially out west. Like if you don't have a big who can stay on the floor, I mean, that's the greatest thing about DeAndre Ayton is that Phoenix found a 5 who's a real 5 who can stay on the floor at the end of a game.
Yeah.
I think if Utah had another option, you'd wonder if Gobert would even be closing those playoff games. And we're talking about the Defensive Player of the Year, which seems insane. So. The league itself, we're talking about like the perfect transition of Mobley's the type of player everyone would have taken 1 to now the way Cade approaches the game is exactly what you would want. Be like, okay, now we have our high pick and roll guy who's going to make decisions and keeps you honest with his shot. But I think we look at bigs, and it was kind of funny watching the under-19 U.S.-France game where we're looking at 2 potential number 1 picks going up against each other, and the reason we like them is because they're over 7 feet and they both have all these perimeter skills. But Mobley's shot isn't there yet from deep. His handle's actually kind of crazy that he can get compact as a 7-footer and then drive at you, which I was like, what is this? And then,
exactly.
And then if somebody comes to help, because you go, okay, look, it's a 7-footer who just crossed us up at the elbow, and now he needs another step to get to the hoop, and you're like, all right, everybody go to him. And then he reads it, and it's like a quick, short area, just dime to the baseline cutter. And you were like, wait, what the hell is this? And I mean, his body is right out of a lab. His running, when you really watch Mobley run in transition off a defensive rebound, like if he doesn't get it, he gets out and runs. It looks like a guard. So
yeah,
there's so much to like about him, and the fact that he just turned 20. I've definitely because so many people are on the Jalen Green thing too, and I'm not going to be knocking him when we talk about him next. I don't have any problem with like anybody loving Mobley, but I think your point is the accurate one. Is that in 5 or 6 years here, we've devalued these guys when. In a way, I think everybody should be trying to find a 5 who can close the game because we just take them off the floor so many times.
Let me throw something else kind of wacky out there. I have one scout that I really trust, one of the very few people that has Mobley 1 on their board and is willing to say it, who says, I actually think you're miscasting Mobley as a 5 in the league. I think he's a 3-4 at the NBA level.
3-4 or just 4? That's the 3 part.
A 3-4. And that what you're talking about is a hyper-mobile, 7-footer with a 7'6" wingspan, who can put the ball on the floor, has the foot speed and lateral quickness to guard multiple positions. Don't worry about the fact that he's not an elite rebounder, doesn't have the physical strength. I wouldn't put him down in the post with, Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid and ask him to sort of guard players like that. But he could be an absolute monster defensively and offensively. And one of the things that he pointed out is that, his assist percentage for a big man, again, is sort of off the charts. I mean, he really sees the floor and can play. That you're talking about 3-and-D, and it's a question mark on the 3 part. We didn't really see Evan Mobley take a lot of 3-pointers, so that part of his game is a question mark. Yeah, it's a question mark for him about how that part of his game develops. But could he in the NBA serve as a hyper-sized wing at the next level? And I think that's sort of interesting progressive thinking, because one of the things about him is it's not just like he's fluid for a 7-footer. He's fluid athletically. He runs like a guard, not like just for a 7-footer. His mobility, makes that an interesting question, and you get a really creative coach. And again, it depends on where he lands. Maybe that's, and maybe if Houston drafts him and they have Christian Wood at the 5, maybe, you're starting to use, Evan Mobley in a different way.
That's interesting. 3 feels like it's pushing it. 4 is totally reasonable because of the perimeter stuff that we've talked about. But the great thing that I liked about him is he wasn't a 4 or 5 that was obsessed with being a 3, which is, I think, what we fall in love with as prospects. I think he probably could have taken more 3s. I thought he was a little hesitant at times, but that's an interesting deal there. But what's funny is, like, when I write down all my stuff, I'll pay attention to like post stuff because he can finish with either hand. He has different release points. It's not just some of that, like a guy will learn like a running hook shot, and it's like he's thinking every single movement through the running hook shot because it's like the only thing he's ever learned, and there's nothing natural about it. Mobley has all these different finishing things, and the way he seals in the post, and the way he makes himself a huge target, and I get all excited about that, and then I think, why do you care? Because they're not going to do any of this stuff with him in the NBA. Like they rarely post anybody anymore, which is. Maybe you don't have to because he has those other skills. I feel like it's such a waste of all the great post stuff that he showed in just 1 year. 3 feels like right now it's stretching it a bit, but hell, that guy works in the NBA and I don't. So maybe it's not crazy.
Interesting food for thought.
It is.
And just again about how the league is evolving and whether Mobley is actually, interestingly, one of those guys that could make that evolution. If you're Houston, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and Cunningham's off the board. Is Mobley your pick?
Yeah, he would be. I've read a bunch of Houston stuff, and it's like, with the emerging backcourt of John Wall and Kevin Porter Jr., and I just go like, why are you worried about any of this stuff? Like, I know the Wall contract. I know Porter Jr. put up some numbers. I think most of the Houston numbers this year. Look, we all knew that Kevin Porter Jr. was a really talented basketball player. I don't think there was ever any denial of that, but I would not be like, if they like Jalen Green better but take Mobley because it's the backcourt fit. Like, I'm just not a fan of bad teams with rosters that nobody else would want making need-based draft picks.
Yeah, and vice versa. You don't not draft Evan Mobley because you have Christian Wood, right? Like you don't. None of these guys on the Rockets roster are as good as Jalen Green or Evan Mobley, right? And so you take the best player available. So I'm a Mobley guy as well. I'm probably one of those folks that is now moved into almost the Cade Cunningham, Evan Mobley, like I'm not sure which way I lean anymore. And so, that'll be interesting where I come out. I got like a couple more weeks to figure it out.